Hi, I'm Chef Mark, and this is Cruising in the Kitchen. Today we're making maple oat scones, favorite of Sydney and Nico's. Okay, so this is the mise en place, like we always do. We always start out with everything all mixed up and ready to go. So this is everything you need to make the recipe. All right, close by. 2 3/4 cups flour, 1/3 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla is also in there, 1/2 cup of peanuts, pecans, toasted, chopped. You don't have to toast them, but they're much better toasted. This is 2 sticks of butter that is cut in lengthwise twice and cubed and left cold. That's part of the recipe here, is that this butter has to be ice cold. So just make sure you use ice cold butter. When you cut it ahead of time, you put it back in the freezer or the fridge. 1/2 cup of regular old-fashioned oats that you put a blender or a Cuisinart and you mix it up. You don't have to get powder out of it, but you know, I definitely I whizzed it for at least 5, 7, 9 seconds to get it that way. Whole egg, 3/4 cup of heavy cream. And this is just the syrup and the vanilla that I put in. So, you combine the dry ingredients. You can do this by hand, you can do this in a mixer. Today we're going to do it in a mixer. If you do it by hand, you need one of those pastry cutters. Salt, baking powder, sugar. Just going to combine that for a second before we put the butter in. Good enough. Now your butter goes in all at once. And this is pretty much the technique of the whole recipe that you really have to perfect for scones. It's basically, you want this to come out to be, they call it pea-sized small crumbs. And it's much easier with the mixer, you'll see. But you can do it by hand with a fork or pastry cutter. So just do it slow at first to coat the butter pieces. Remember, the butter's super hard. So if you put it on fast, you're just gonna, everything's gonna come flying out of the machine. So get a little bit faster as we get going. And basically, the blades of this mixer is breaking down the butter and gonna turn it into pea-sized pieces. You can actually do this with your fingertips. We're taught to do this with our fingertips. In the old days, you would quickly do this with your 2 fingertips on both hands. And you'd have to do it very fast though, because the warmth of your hand would melt the butter. So this is much easier to do. You can even chill this bowl ahead of time if you want to. That'll make it easier. If it's a super hot day in the summer, put the bowl in the fridge, put your butter in the freezer, you'll have a lot better result. Because the whole trick is you don't want the butter to melt. That's the whole purpose of this. You want to make crumbs, you don't want to melt anything. So this butter has to be cold, if not frozen. I can't really stress that enough, but that's really what a scone is. It's frozen butter, cold butter, that is incorporated into the dry mixture. And it'll come out being like crumbs eventually. It takes a couple minutes. Do this by hand, it'll take a lot longer. You use a pastry cutter by hand, it'll take a lot longer. The mixer saves you at least 50% of the time. I also think it's a good idea to use the little pastry blender that you can buy for this, so that you can get a feel of it once again. I keep saying that because once you use machines, you lose that ability to feel it with your own hands. So if you know what it's supposed to feel like first, and then you use a machine later, you'll be a better baker. We're getting there. You can't really overdo it. The only thing you can really do here is get the butter too soft, which, in cold weather is not really an issue. So we're getting there. We're just about pea sizes. I'll stop it for a second and show you. I'm going to let it go a teeny bit more, but we're basically there. We got lots of pea sizes. You can barely see any big chunks. Pretty much there. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so. I think that'll do it. And then we're going to lay this out on the board here and put this together And the last thing you do is throw in the pecans if you're using them. Remember, if somebody is allergic, skip those. So, everything's good with the butter. And I'm going to do all the other ingredients by hand because the whole purpose of a scone is not to overwork the flour. So basically everything else goes into the dry mixture. Incorporate the oats. And then go right ahead with everything. You can whisk the egg ahead of time if you want to into the cream. Not super important. So, break up that egg a little bit and then just do this. If this was the machine, it would be too rough because you wouldn't catch it when this slowly becomes a mixture that we're going to play with outside of the bowl. So basically, before I dump it out of the bowl, I'm going to try to coat all the flour I can with the moisture of this mixture. A lot of moisture actually on the spatula too, so I'm just about there. You don't want to overwork it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So you don't have to worry about it all being in one piece right now. We're going to fix that. And we're going to make a disc out of this about 8, 12 or so, 8 to 10 inches wide. The size of your circle isn't really that important, but for me, it's going to be the width of this paper. I'm just using the paper because it's easier to clean up. If you have like a giant pastry board or some sort of board that you have, you just don't want everything all over the place. And I think the paper helps kind of grab it and help me work with the dough a little bit too. So it does look like a mess, and people will probably be a little uncomfortable at this point thinking that they're really going to make a scone. But we're really going to make a scone. So, basically, push the dough together into a circle. And I think the paper's handy to do stuff like this. And it makes even less of a mess and get your edges a little bit nicer. And you notice I have a rolling pin nearby if I want to roll it. But basically, there's enough moisture in this. And the paper helps to kind of keep it into a circle. You can either roll it or not. Actually, today I don't know if I'm even going to roll it. You have to worry about some dry crumbs or some wetness over here. Just kind of pat it into a circle any way you can. Roughly even thickness. I would say 3/4 of an inch. An inch. I would want it less than that. Too bad it'd be too small of a scone. And you can cut these into 8 or 12 or 16. Just cut it like a regular wedge. I'll show you that. So there you go. I mean, it looked like a mess. I mean, you have a little bit of extra dry stuff, but don't worry about that. And I'll show you how you cut them. Make sure you have your tray nearby, one of these type things in case it's for helping you lift it. Anything you can use, a pizza cutter, a knife, anything you want. You make a T. And then cut each one in half again. And just paste it back together. It's pretty forgiving. I kind of hold my finger like that just to get the knife out. You want a sharp knife, obviously. And if your knife is getting sticky, just put a little flour on it. Those look more or less even. So, now you want to get them off the paper and onto this. anything. You can use like a pie wedge, anything you want. Not super fragile. They come right out. And they'll bake right up. I like the way the paper assists me, but you can definitely do this without paper. Just make sure paste the marble, the little pieces of marble sometimes people use are very helpful with this kind of stuff because it keeps everything cool. Or a countertop that's cold, just make sure it's clean. That's why the paper is handy. It just keeps everything clean. And we're going to throw these in a 350 oven, 20-25 minutes. And then we're going to make a glaze for them. We'll come back to that. And we're not going to egg wash them or anything because we're just going to put a glaze right on top of them. So there's no need for egg wash at all. So these are a little bit different that way. Anything that you don't see cut, just do that. Almost as, these are really big scones actually. I think they are. Give them a little bit of room for each other. If it does something like that, you don't have to worry because when it bakes, it's all going to be together. So you don't have to flip out about anything. Make some room. Two little guys coming in, a little bit smaller. So you get 8. Not quite even, but that's the way cooking goes. And then you can take some of this stuff. Don't be afraid to kind of play with your food a little bit. Squish it back together again. And these will be super flaky because it was just enough moisture to get these to form into this. If it was too wet, the right amount is just right. You don't want any of this powdery stuff, but in the oven they'll go. We'll come back out when they're finished, and then we will glaze them. So they came out of the oven, 24 minutes, 350 degrees, nice and firm. You can see the bottoms. Obviously you don't want them soft at all, but you don't want them hard. Just keep an eye on the oven in 22-24 minutes, depending on how your oven is. A little bit crumbly, but those look very tender. So this is a very this recipe is for very simple icing, which is, this is approximately 3 cups of 10x sugar, powdered sugar they call it. And it's just a matter of how much liquid goes in here as far as the consistency of your frosting. You can have very thin frosting, very thick frosting. So we'll start with a tablespoon of butter, tablespoon of maple syrup. I'm going to eyeball that. And we'll start with that because we're going to add milk as we need it. I'm going to start with a tablespoon of milk. But basically, the consistency, and you can do this in a mixer too, but you just keep adding liquid until you get it to the consistency that you want. It should take most of that milk, I imagine. If you add too much milk, you don't have to worry either because you can just add more powdered sugar and dilute it even more. So getting there. And you want it to be able to spread it. And here's icing. Pretty much that's it. You get the color from the maple syrup. Mix it all in good. And that will definitely be easily drizzable on the scones. You want them to be able to be spreadable. So put as much as or as little as you like on them. I'll do one for you. Start with that. Maybe move on to something like this. Try to catch your corners. Get it covered. It's very decadent, for sure. Maple, oat, pecan, nut, scone. A little more nut even. So that's how you do it. Very easy, very simple. Enjoy those. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And see you on my next adventure on cruising in the kitchen.